What's good on YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing a video on episode 47 of Uchuu Sentai Kyuranger. This is the second to last episode of the season and it was a really good episode. So the episode is called The Savior's Promise. The episode starts off with our typical flashback of what happened in the previous episode, which we learn obviously that Tsurugi is sucked in and what happens is that Don Armage takes on the form of a combination of himself and Tsurugi, and also Sho is killed and is sucked in. But when he is sucked in, he does not take on the form of Don Armage, so they don't change the form to represent him or a combination of him and Tsurugi. Instead, what happens is that he's actually sucked in as Planetium energy, which is something that we learn about, that it could be the ground, the objects, whatever, or it could be a person. And the thing is that, you know, he gains the power of the earth and the power of the universe and everything. So what ends up happening from here is that Lucky suggests that, you know, at this point what we're left to do is do a really risky plan that might lead to us all dying. It's super risky. It could lead to complete death for all of us and the universe will be destroyed, but we have to do something. We have very little choice in the matter. And, you know, Lucky questions whether or not everyone's willing to do it, but everyone wants to do it. So what does end up happening from here is that we end up seeing different conversations occur, everyone reflecting on different things, and them realizing this is the end. For starters, we end up having a conversation between Hammy and Garu, which actually is pretty interesting. The conversation talks about how, like, Hammy's upset with Lucky for thinking that they wouldn't want to do this attack, because at this point they've done everything, and, you know, well, what other choice do they have at this point? So that's something. Hammy also mentions the fact that, you know, she remembers back when she first joined the Kyurangers and saw Lucky that she didn't want a part of him. She wanted him gone. She hated him. And then later on, she learned to like him. Same time, Garo talks about how he remembers when they first recruited him, he didn't want to deal with Lucky. He didn't like the guy. Now he's, like, devoted to protecting him, you know? So it's a very different mindset and situation between the two of them, because they both felt a negative feeling towards Lucky, but things changed. Then we ended up having a conversation between Balance and Naga about, you know, Naga's really scared about everything that's happening, and this is a first for him. He's never been scared. So that's interesting, and Balance basically comforts him with, you know what, I'll always be there for you no matter what. We're partners. So that is something to consider, of course. So then from there, we ended up seeing Spada and Raptor talking to each other. Raptor is upset because, you know, Sho risked his life in a reckless way, and, you know, he's reckless in general, but this was the one that was a big deal because he was reckless to the point of death. So that's a really big concern. But Spada does comfort Raptor. They do exchange looks, and there's always this sense of them being potentially in a romantic relationship. It never seems to be true, but it feels like there should be something there. Even though it's never expressed directly, it feels like they should be in a romantic relationship in some capacity. But they always, you know, exchange looks. So then from there, we end up seeing Kotaro, Stinger, and Champ together. They are discussing things as well. You know, this is the end. Kotaro questions whether or not he's gotten stronger, and Stinger comforts him saying, you know, you're the strongest of the earth, and eventually you'll become stronger than even Tsurugi was. So, you know, there's that comforting moment, and then they get pumped up and just try to sing a song together, which actually is Stinger's theme from the episode that had Stinger in it. That was, like, the one that was focused on him. I never got to review that one, but it is an interesting episode, and I'll definitely tell you that much. It's worth watching. So from here, what does end up happening is that the Kyurangers go down to Earth and they get ready to transform. They do so, and what happens is that as they transform, they end up fighting Suyu endeavors, some endeavors, and eventually they do their roll calls while being transformed, while fighting, and then at that point, they start splitting off into smaller groups. For example, Champ ends up seeing some proto-champs, so he ends up going after those with Stinger and Kotaro. In the meantime, Naga and Balance go off and fight some Suyu endeavors and some endeavors as well. Raptor and Spada actually end up going off together, but they go off into their mechas, which is interesting because Raptor actually doesn't use her mecha. She uses the Orion Battler, which is not something that typically happens where someone else uses it, but we've been seeing it a lot more in these more recent episodes. So in this case, she uses the Orion Battler, while Spada for some reason uses his own mecha, which is kind of a weird choice, but it makes sense because of what happens here. Because what does end up occurring is Spada and Raptor have to deal with some Mori Misers that are attacking, and they manage to do pretty well in battle. At one point, though, one of the Mori Misers tries to attack the Orion Battler, and then Raptor gets it. Was going to be attacked, but then Spada blocks the attack, and then his mecha is shot down to the ground. At that point, Raptor beats up the Mori Miser and then goes down to the ground to talk to Spada. In the meantime, I forgot to also mention that Hammy, Garu, and Lucky are together as well, because that's the other group. So anyway, going back to Raptor and Spada, basically Spada says, I want to protect you now. We've all had our moments to protect each other, and, I need to protect you. And basically Raptor says, you're going to make a meal for us and everything, and, we'll all be happy together. It'll just be a really good time. And what happens is that at one point some Endeavors are trying to attack Raptor, so then Spada goes in and blocks the attack, and he says, well, I have to make sure that you are alive so that I can actually feed you. So at that point, they exchange glances, which this time it really comes across as being like they really care about each other, which is nice. From here, what does end up happening is that we end up seeing Stinger, Champ, and Kotaro fighting a bunch, which is interesting, and eventually they go out with a bang. Then at one point we end up seeing Balance and Naga together. Balance ends up losing power, and Naga sits next to him, and there's this really touching moment with the two of them. Him realizing that he's learned so much about emotion, joy, sadness, anger, all this stuff, and it was just a really emotional moment. And at that point, Naga just sits down next to him and some Endeavors, and so Endeavors go and attack them. Then, in the meantime, we end up seeing our last group, which is... Yes, that's right. Our last group. And that one is Hammy, Garu, and Lucky. What does end up happening is that Garu is attacked at one point without noticing it, and he suddenly de-transforms. At that point, he tells Hammy and Lucky to go off alone, and at that point, Garu continues to fight. In the meantime, Hammy and Lucky go to Don Armage, which he's gotten a bunch of his power brought back to him, and at this point, they are left to fight. They transform. Lucky uses Shishi Red Orion mode, which is cool, and what happens is that at one point, Hammy loses her power after fighting, and then following this, Don Armage sucks in the Planetium energy of the Kyurangers, and all 11 of them, not including Lucky, but the other 11 are sucked right into Don Armage, meaning that they're all dead at this point. So then, obviously the question is, what's going to happen? Is it going to just be Lucky and that's it? Well, what does end up happening is that Lucky ends up trying to discuss things with Tsurugi, which is he's still kind of there, because he still hasn't fully been taken over at this point. And you keep on seeing these bursts of energy from like the Kyotama inside of him splurting out, which is the sound when you activate the Kyotama for Ho-Ho Soldier. So when he keeps on trying to do that from the inside, and then at one point, they're fighting and everything, and Lucky is using Shishi Red Orion mode. Eventually, the Psycho Kyotama, which allows him to take on that form, breaks, so he can't use that form. And then at that point, what happens is that Lucky ends up punching in and jamming his fist into Don Armage's body with his Kyotama, where all 12 Kyotama rest, because they kept their Kyotamas inside there. And what happens is that at that point they all, feel the energy within them, and they all go in for an attack. So the 11 of them are inside and they're attacking, and then Lucky goes in with a slash from the outside. So this whole slash leads to Don Armage splurting open the 11 Kyurangers, meaning that Tsurugi and Sho returned with the other 9 that had just died. So they're all back to life. No one seems to be dead. Everyone's in good health. In fact, because of the Planetium energy, and since Tsurugi was the one that he was using to actually come back and everything, Tsurugi's back to full health pretty much. So in other words, like, he's good. Like, he can continue. He's nowhere near as weak as he was. He can just fight now. So there's no issue there. So then at that point, what happens is that we end up seeing this other form of Don Armage. It's his weakened form without anyone being attached to him. And it's a unique looking form. At that point, the Kyurangers are joyous that they have power back. In fact, Lucky actually gains back his Psycho Kyurema at that point. And so everyone's just really, really happy to see each other, that, you know, everyone's alive. At that point, what ends up happening is that Don Armage ends up using his Planetium energy abilities to suck in all the people around the universe inside of him. So all of them get sucked in, and he takes on this form that's a combination of himself and a Mori Miser, which are like the big ship monsters that they were fighting before. So that's interesting to see, and that is his final form. So he actually had 4 forms this entire season. He had the clone form, the form that he used towards the end before he actually got the form that he had when he when he was Kiravo, the one that he had with Tsurugi, and then this form. So 4 forms, and then if you include the one that was like before he actually had this last form, then you can say 5. So those are the forms that he has, and it's pretty interesting. All that happens afterwards is we end up seeing the Kyurangers getting ready to charge in, all 12 of them. And it seems like it's going to be a cool episode next week. So that will be the last episode next week. It will lead to, most likely, as you would imagine, the Kyurangers defeating Don Armage, and then we'll have to wait and see what happens from there. The preview clip really doesn't show a whole lot. Basically, all it shows is that all the Kyurangers will be there, they'll be fighting, and it should be a pretty interesting episode. It doesn't seem clear as to whether or not there'll be any endeavors. It might just be Don Armage the whole time. It will be interesting to see also what whether or not they'll do a mecha battle or not. They might not. And if they are they going to do the 4 mechas, or are they going to do the 4 mechas with like the Orion cannon as the finisher? How are they going to do it? I don't know yet. But I'd love to know your guys' opinions. Did you guys enjoy this episode? I'm looking forward to seeing what the last episode will be like. And then following that, we'll be seeing Lupin Ranger versus Power Ranger. And that should be very interesting. So please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you guys think. And I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71. And goodbye, guys.